I grew up in the 70s, which was the time period when contemporary Christian music was created. Okay? Christians struggled to know what to do with contemporary Christian music. Some said it was wrong, others said it was right. Those who said it was wrong struggled to articulate what was wrong about it. It wasn't hard to see what was wrong with Hell's Bells and Highway to Hell and AC/DC and Kiss, but the crossover stuff, the appropriation of contemporary secular genre wedded with Christian lyrics was difficult, and many people believe that music is amoral. That is, that musical notes themselves and rhythms and even melodies and harmonies and combinations of sounds do not communicate moral value. I've been on a search since I was a teen for a carefully articulated biblical answer to morality and music. I've spent time interviewing the Dean of School of Fine Arts at Bob Jones University, listening to all of their presentational material. And while many of the conclusions I agreed with, I was not satisfied with the argumentation that was provided to support the conclusions. I want something that's transparently biblical, something that's cogent, coherent, and compelling to the average audience that I'm trying to address. Makagina, in his 4 lectures, was the best thing I'd heard to that point, and then I read further his book, Music. Suddenly the title just slipped my mind. John has written a fairly lengthy book on the meaning of music, or something with music and meaning in the title, and found his argumentation compelling in its main lines, not necessarily all the details, but the main lines. And so I acknowledge my debt to Makagina for a good bit of the lecture that I give today, but I think I've honed it down and refined it some. So with that background, I want to start out with the premise that all communication has moral value. That body language, gestural communication, tone of voice, intonational communication, as well as imitative and associational communication necessarily has value. There's no such thing as communication that cannot be judged morally. And I appeal here to Matthew 12:36 and 37, where Jesus said, we'll be judged by our words. Okay, so does that mean then that as long as I don't say it out loud, God won't hold me accountable for it? No, of course not. Word here is an example of forms of communication. All of our communication will be judged. And Jesus specifically addresses careless or idle, worthless communication. Any question about that premise? Music communicates, therefore, in 3 ways. It communicates through lyrics, that's obvious. It communicates through imitation of emotions and bodily movements. And it communicates through association. And all 3 levels of music's communicative value must be analyzed. So we'll just start with the easy one and quickly run through this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but have you measured the lyrics of the song you listen to by Scripture? Specifically, is it beneficial? The lyrics. Is it edifying? Do the lyrics build me up spiritually? Is it God glorifying? Does it reflect the unique excellence of God's character to these lyrics? In what ways are these lyrics true to reality as God sees it? Okay? That would be an important question for folk music lyrics. Does it portray reality in a way that is in harmony with God's perspective or not in harmony with God's perspective? Are the lyrics lovely? So since we're to think on things that are lovely and virtuous, do the lyrics meet those qualifications? Okay. One of the reasons why I encourage students to do the music fast that I offer for extra credit is that both my experience and my wife's experience is that fasting from our regular diet of music had a radical impact on our perception of our previous diet. I'll just briefly tell her story. She grew up listening to country music, which morphed into soft rock, pop in college. She was at a conservative holiness college, was listening to those genres. She came to Bob Jones University, where all of that genre is not permitted for the students. And so she was on a forced fast for the first year of her time there. Somewhere toward the end of that year, she happened to be flipping through the radio and just caught a few bars of a song that had been one of her favorite songs in the past. But she knew she wasn't allowed to listen to it, so she didn't, but it started the track playing in her head. And as she listened to the track in her head, she was shocked, flabbergasted at what the lyrics were saying, because she had never really paid attention to the lyrics. It was the song, the country song, I called the artist this morning, can I call the art? Reba McEntire's song that has the name Fancy in it. Fancy, Don't Let Me Down, or something like that. And this was, she said, I liked the beat. I liked the way the music made me feel. But I'm now running the lyrics in my head. And the lyrics are, I've gotten you a red dress that's got a slit up to the hip. If you treat the men right, they'll treat you right. Don't let me down. Fancy. This is the mom setting up her daughter to be a prostitute, saying, it's time for you to enter a life of prostitution. Don't let me down. Well, you know, Mary has, here I'm a person who's committed to a life of holiness and entire sanctification, and I've been feeding my soul on music that I liked and ignoring the lyrics when the lyrics were antithetical to everything I'm shocked and horrified that one of my favorite songs was about launching your daughter into prostitution. And it's very difficult for us to be objective in our evaluation of our musical choices while we're immersed in our musical choices. Being out of that through deliberate decision to fast provides you the opportunity for emotional, psychological, and spiritual distance that aids objectivity. We all know that country, rock, and pop lyrics are frequently ungodly. Country music celebrates drinking, partying, sex outside of marriage, whose boots are under your bed tonight. rock music celebrating anger, rebellion, drugs, unrestrained sex. Uh, Pop's lyrics are typically sensual, trivial. If it feels good, do it. Live by your feelings. Okay. There may be exceptions, but that's the general characterization. So the question is, are you listening to any of these genres where the lyrics have not been evaluated biblically? Okay, that's the easy question. The next is the morality of the imitative qualities of music. Uh, and I want to take this statement from John Macagina that I felt like captured the essence of this. If the relationship between musical symbols and the emotions is entirely arbitrary, which means you can attach any emotion to any music, then it would be conceivable for us to equate a harsh, rapid, loud, dissonant, and heavily accented instrumental piece with sensations of peace, calmness, and rest. For example, let's put the words of peace, peace, wonderful peace coming down from the Father above to John Philip Sousa's Stars and Stripes Forever. Bum, bum, ba, bum, 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 bum. And let's sing peace, peace, wonderful peace. Okay. Say, whoa, the music does not complement the message of the lyrics. The music is forceful, energetic, physical movement, get up and go. Okay? So what that tells us that there is a relationship between musical symbols and the emotions that they evoke. The relationship is not a relationship of the word bee is defined as an insect with X number of legs and wings that collects pollen and creates honey in a hive. Okay. There's a one-to-one correspondence between the meaning communicated by the word bee. Okay. Music does not have that kind of one-to-one correspondence. I can't play an A minor chord and that chord be defined in terms of even its emotional communication. But minor keys have an evocative quality of sadness, slowness, potentially the whole range of whatever sad could border. A major key is often deliberately chosen because of its tonal brightness. It's happy, it's pleasant. Okay, and there's that kind of evocative, emotional quality, communication in music. So then we can say that when music imitates bodily rhythms and movements, when music imitates attitudes, emotional states, and moods, we can evaluate whether that attitude, depression, discouragement, anger, frivolity, is appropriate biblically. We can evaluate whether the emotional state is one that is, is a state of rage condoned for the believer. So would music that evokes rage or anger fit the call to be slow to anger, be angry and sin not, let not the sun go down on your wrath. The wrath of man does not work the righteousness of God, and so on. I'm sure you all know this. You can go out on the web and actually choose your music based on the mood you want. There's whole websites where you can say, okay, I want to choose sensual music. That's a category, and there's music that has been determined to be evocative of sensuality. I can choose restful. I can choose energetic, I can choose happy, I can choose angry, restful, I can choose energetic, I can choose happy, I can choose angry. We can go just based on the mood. So then we can say that music that evokes uses of the body, attitudes, or emotional states that are contrary to Scripture is immoral. Now, at this point, I've stepped away from the level of objectivity that exists at lyrical evaluation and moved to a degree of subjectivity, that is, that says if the music evokes in you uses of the body, attitude, or emotional states that are contrary to Scripture, then for you that music will be immoral. And so there may be some music that strikes me as quieting and restful, that because of another person's either background, emotional state, or current spiritual status would be depressing for them. It would facilitate thinking negative thoughts. It would evoke a mood that would be contrary to Scripture. And that way, a thing could be acceptable morally for me and not acceptable morally for another person. Am I making sense? Any questions? Okay. When it comes to associations, I apply the principles of 1 Corinthians 8 and 10. When you go to the meat market, you do not have to find out where the meat was butchered and who it was offered to. So we do not have to investigate all the potential negative associations of any piece of music before we accept it into our repertoire. So I don't have to find out who the composer of this classical piece was, what kind of morality he exhibited, whether he was a homosexual or not, whether he was promiscuous or not. I don't have to investigate the associations. On the other hand, if I know the associations, I am responsible for avoiding doing what I know has caused other people to stumble or myself to stumble. So if every time I hear this classical piece by Tchaikovsky, I am reminded of the promiscuous event that he composed the piece to celebrate, and therefore am led down a path of promiscuous thinking, the associations that have been connected to that music in my mind are going to eliminate it as a moral option for me. Whereas another person who doesn't know any of that information, not having those associations, will be able to appreciate the positive features of the music and not have any negative associations. Okay. Now, that will have to do with your background before you were saved, music you listened to when you were not a Christian, the context in which you listened to it, the kind of behaviors you participated in those contexts. There's a whole associational undercurrent that will be individual to you as a person. If you find that so-and-so was saved out of a deep life of sin that was associated with X genre of music, and you don't think that genre of music has inherently either lyrical or evocative problems morally, but you shouldn't play it around them. Example, the first time I heard the symphonic production of A Bridge Over Troubled Waters, I thought the song was very beautiful. Okay. As far as I can tell, it's emotional evocation, and it's the whole, both, since there were no lyrics, it reflected beauty, order, the nature of God, was attractive. That was great. Then I meet Ron. Ron Talapetri was doing LSD in the 60s and listening to Bridge Over Troubled Waters because that's what the guys who wrote the song Bridge Over Troubled Waters were doing. They were on a trip when they wrote the song, and it was all about how drugs take you out of your troubled situation and let you escape. And so he hears this music being played over a Christian radio station, and he's enraged because of all of this associational background that he has with the music. And I'm like, what's your problem, dude? It's nice music by anybody's standard, most conservative of standards. He's like, but you don't know. And then he gives me all this associational information, at which point I refrain from playing that music around Ron. If that information doesn't taint the song for me, then I can continue to enjoy the music for its own value and say, well, I reject the associations, and I can move on. Am I making sense? So that's how I'm loving my brother. So I conclude that music is not amoral since it is a medium of communication whose musical qualities can be judged, both at the emotionally and physically imitative levels and the associational level. Questions about what I've said so far? I had a student in my first section who was bothered by John Macagina saying that music is not a language, and thought that John was implying that because it's not a language, it's amoral, but it's quite obvious if you listen to all 4 lectures, that's the very opposite of what John is arguing. He argues that it is moral, and it does have moral qualities that can be judged. But I agree with John that music cannot be classified technically as a language. It should be classified as a meta-language. A meta-language is something that is over the top of, beyond whatever its meta. So a meta-narrative is a narrative that spans the totality of human history or your life. A metaphysics is the study of things that are beyond the scope of the study of physical forces. Okay. Well, meta-language would be things that do not have the kind of relationship that languages have. In language, you have a word, and you have a referent, and that referent is the thing in the real world that the word refers to, and then you have the meaning. Okay? And an example is the word be refers to any of those things that you see buzzing around out there. Okay? Those are the reference for the word be. They exist in the real world. The meaning I already gave you earlier. Okay? But if I play you a chord, there's no referent in the real world to which that chord refers. And there's no dictionary definition of objective semantic content that can be assigned to that chord. Okay. That chord, in combination with other chords, may evoke emotion, may imitate movement, may create mood, and therefore the evocation, the imitation, can be judged as to its morality based on the nature of the mood or the movement, and so on. So that's why we argue that music is meta-linguistic. It is not it's not the same thing that language is. It doesn't do the same things exactly and in the same ways that language does, but I still call it language because there's communication. So, we could have a study of body language, but nobody can go to school and learn body language, okay? Because shrugging your left shoulder does not have definable content for everybody. One person may do that, and it doesn't mean the same thing as another person. So this chord in one musical piece can be a part of something that's positive, and in another musical piece, part of something that's negative in terms of its evocation or imitative qualities. I hope that's not too deep. Okay. Now, we also need to factor in culture as part of the contexts, plural, that give meaning to music. Just as genre informs how we interpret literature, okay? Let's say I hand you a book, it does not have a cover on it, you open it up, and you see a heading that says the cell mitochondria. And there's this picture of this cell over here. You say, oh, we've got some kind of a textbook. And therefore, I shouldn't be expecting to laugh when I read the text. Okay? I don't read it like I do a joke book. Neither should I expect to be entertained by reading the text. I don't read it like I do a novel. Okay? So genre determines the reading expectations we have, in the same way culture determines the interpretive expectations that we have. Determines, contributes to. It's probably a better way to say that. And we must be aware that changing a music's cultural context may also change its perceived meaning. So, as an example, I say that the music used in Muslim calls to worship. How many have ever heard a mosque give the call to prayer or worship? Okay. There's this high-pitched wailing, rapidly modulated, kind of. It's not quite the same as Chinese opera, but it's in that vein. It strikes the Western ear as sad and mournful. What's this guy wailing about? You know, he just lose his mom. But it strikes a Muslim ear as reverent and worshipful because it's been associated with the call to prayer. Okay. I went to Kenya in 2005. In Kenya, the worship music is loud. It is speakers. Your hair is streaming back from your head due to the volume. It is loud. I'm exaggerating a little, but you get the idea. It is physically engaged. Okay, whatever international choirs we've ever had on the GBS platform, they have all been highly toned down in comparison to the way people actually worship in Kenya. Well, what's the reason for that? Well, in our cultural context, the kind of physical motions that are normal in their context are perceived as sensuous. Why do you have to move your hips like that? Okay. What's up with all the body motion? Just stand still and praise God. We get the words. Okay? That's the Western cultural context. It perceives the genre differently. But on the other hand, I remember Annie George, a classmate of mine at Hope Sound from the Virgin Islands, came to Hope Sound. She said, when I first came to Hope Sound, I thought these people are the most spiritually dead, lifeless people I've ever been around. They don't have an ounce of the grace of God in them. I mean, look at this. We sing a wonderful hymn to God, and they're all sitting like bumps on a log. Okay. Well, she had come from the cultural context where vocal and physical expression of worship was the normal way of expressing jubilance, comes to this and thinks that we're dead. She said, now I learned that in fact you weren't dead. You just express your worship differently. Okay? So we need to keep this in mind when we do cross-cultural ministry. Be sensitive to how a specific genre of music will be perceived in the given cultural context. Perceived in the given cultural context we're in. So, when we love God, our music is lawful, it's beneficial, it's edifying, it's God glorifying, it's Christ honoring. The issue with music is not what's wrong with it, or is there anything wrong with it? The issue is, does this please God and move me in His direction? Okay? Expect the answer to this question to change as you mature spiritually. Okay? My ability to perceive theological depth at 18 was significantly less than my ability to perceive it at 28. By 28, I'd been through 5 years of postgraduate education. I was well in the process of writing my dissertation. Sat through lots of systematic theology. I memorized large portions of the New Testament. And so my appetite for meat, spiritual meat, was different than my appetite at 18. And you should expect your appetite to mature as you mature in your walk with God. And if I set for my boys at supper time, here's 2 options. You can have sirloin steak, or you can have a plate full of Jolly Ranchers. Okay, candy. They're going to choose the Jolly Ranchers. Okay, their maturity level is quite low. Okay, am I making sense here? So you should expect your desire for spiritual depth to increase, which will then eliminate music from your repertoire which does not feed you at the level you need to be fed. Why is it that college students like yourself want some substance in a meal? They don't just want to eat a meal of cotton candy. That's not good for me. It's not going to help me, give me the energy I need, give me the resources I need. I mean, it's going to give me a headache. It's going to do all kinds of bad things to me. So, so no cotton candy, please. Steak. Now, I want to conclude with this slide, which I need to read the notes from here. This is a piece by Jean Edward Veith. It was published in World Magazine. Veith was probably born in the 50s, grew up in the 50s and 60s. And this was quite profound to me. I hope you'll find it helpful. Adults who remember the music they listened to when they were teenagers as being idealistic or at least fun, she's talking about 50s and 60s music, are often taken aback by today's popular music. It's so depressing. If today's rock and roll is not anguished and miserable, it's angry, even furious. As for rap music, it is filled with violence, promiscuity, and hatred, especially for women. Adults from the peace and love generation wonder, what are these kids so mad about? And then they move into old fogey mode. These performers are multimillionaires who have everything they want. They've got no reason to be so negative all the time. Then what's the attraction? Why are so many kids buying this stuff? Christians worry about the influence such music has on young people and on the culture as a whole, and rightly so. But Mary Eberstadt, a fellow at the Hoover Institution, suggests that adults not only consider what music does to young people, but also what it tells us about them. In one section of her book, Home Alone America, Miss Eberstadt shows how songs that family values advocates most oppose prove the case for family values. She argues that today's rock is the music of abandonment, compulsively complaining about broken homes and families, and especially absent fathers. She studied the lyrics and lives of the most popular performers, from alternative rockers to rap stars, and finds this to be a single, obsessively repeated theme that shows up explicitly in song after song. Papa Roach sings Broken Home with the lines, quote, "I know my mother loves me, but does my father even care?" Everclear sings Father of Mine about a father walking out on the family with the plea, quote, "Take me back to the day when I was still your golden boy." And in Everclear's Wonderful, which some call the best rock song about divorce ever written, the singer yearns for the way things were before his parents split. Quote, "I want the things that I had before, like a Star Wars poster on my bedroom door." Blink 182 had a hit with Stay Together for the Kids, which recognizes there's no easy solution. Quote, "What stupid poem could fix this home?" But then adds, quote, "I'd read it every day." End quote. In Pink's Family Portrait, the singer pleads with her father not to leave, making poignantly childish promises. Quote, "I won't spill the milk at dinner." Kurt Cobain said that he had a happy childhood until his parents got a divorce when he was 7, an experience that he wrote about again and again in his music. Okay. Miss Everhart finds the same subject matter in songs by Good Charlotte, Pearl Jam, Linkin Park, Slipknot, Disturbed, and Korn. Many rappers never even knew their fathers. And this fact, according to Miss Everstad, is lamented in the lyrics of nearly every hip-hop artist. One of the most violent, the late Tupac Shakur, raps in Papa's song lyrics how he, quote, "had to play catch by myself," and prays, quote, "Please send me a pops before puberty." Snoop Dogg in Mama Raised Me said, "It's probably Pop's fault how I ended up gang banging, crack slanging, not giving an F." And as for Eminem, perhaps the most foul-mouthed, angry, bitter, and popular rapper of them all, Miss Everstadt shows that rage at his father and mother for abandoning him is the emotional center of his songs. These songwriters and performers are drawing on their own experience, and all the fame and fortune cannot make up for the pain that they still feel. They're putting into words and music what half of American young people feel. Yes, the music is often vile and a bad influence, and divorce, abandonment, and bad parenting are even viler and have a worse influence. Christians concerned about the culture can strike a mighty blow in the culture wars by being good parents themselves. So the next time you pull up to a stoplight, somebody next to you is rattling your windows with their music, or you hear the anger, the vitriol, the rage that's being screamed by the performer, remember the broken child that's behind all of that. What you're hearing is the expression of brokenness that doesn't know how to get fixed and desperately needs a solution that Christ offers. Yes.
I have a question. Like in secular music, like rock music will express pain, but then at the end of most of the songs they offer, uh, their solutions are anger, rebellion, or just hopelessness. But is it okay to express the pain and then offer a message of Christ?
Why wouldn't it be okay?
Or because people, I know a lot of Christian rock music that will express the pain, but then in the end it offers hope. And that's why a lot of I think a lot of young Christian people are attracted to it is because they have all these pains and things that they don't know how to deal with it. But then a lot of our holiness music doesn't um, tell us or help us express it or help us know what to do with it, whereas the Christian rock music will help you overcome it.
Okay, well, I think that's a good observation. Let me address that from a theological standpoint, and that is that when we find the psalmists expressing disappointment, anger, and grief, we uh, we always find them moving to resolution in God. Now, what's the difference between someone expressing this and finding resolution and then moving beyond what got resolved, and somebody who listens every day for entertainment purposes to the expression of pain on a repeated basis, expression of anger on a repeated basis? Okay? I can see how a musical vehicle that connects to the problem and points to the solution could have a point place in a person's growth, but I don't see how it becomes my preferred mode of self-enjoyment fits. Okay? So that's part of the difference between how we use our music. Most of us use our music not as a vehicle to get us from point A to point B, and once we're at point B, we don't worry about A anymore. We use it as the background music of our life, right?
Actually, I think even in conservative holiness, like the old hymns, we still have that. Like he brought me out of the deep miry clay.
Lyrically, you do,
Yeah,
not musically.
Yeah, lyrically you do. But still you have that sense of this is what I was, this is what God brought me through. But we still, even in our church services, we still continue to use them.
But see, he's not talking about the lyrics. He's talking about the musical genre, the vehicle that's used to communicate that. And so the musical genre of He Brought Me Out is a positive, upbeat, evocative musical structure that always is pointing us to the end, right? And yes, we recall in that positive evocation the past, whereas what we've got here is a musical evocation of the anger, pain, and turmoil that stays. So we're constantly evoking the emotions of anger, pain, and turmoil in the recalling of the past, which I think is a mistake. Am I to go back and re-feel how it felt to sin? Am I to call back to mind the emotional states of the sinful life? No, I have exchanged that for a biblically structured emotional state. And I can recall that I was in a pit, but I don't go back to experience the emotions and so on. I don't reenact my sins for memory's sake.
I think, like some of the contemporary musical songs that I've heard, that it's more of a state of the pain of those songs. So if you're still, like if you're reflecting upon, the pain that sin caused, that's and then showing and still going through that progression, it's still, to me, it would seem to be edifying because it leads to your spiritual growth to show that, I'm not going to go back to that pain anymore.
Sure.
It's being expressed.
But you used the verb reflect. How many people are actually engaged in reflection when they're listening to their music? Most are not. That's not what music is for. I don't put on my music so that I can think deeply. I put on my music to make me feel better, to give me a boost, to kind of get other things out of the way so I can study. So there's a place for reflection in music, but the vast majority of people are not doing that. Okay. And maybe some people like yourself who tend to be more contemplative by personality would be inclined to do that more often. But I find that the very reason I can't listen to music while I study or do things is that I have to reflect, and it gets in the way of what I'm trying to do. Okay, I can't just let there be noise, because my brain is too engaged. But I'm unusual, I think.
I guess I'm not moving.
So, other questions?